He'd built an empire on his own, but nothing could fill the emptiness of the silent mornings. On Christmas Eve, he woke up late and rushed home, but when he got there, expecting to find his children alone, he found a nanny caring for them as if they were her own. And on Christmas Day, in front of a still bare tree, he realized that maybe, just maybe, it was possible to love again. If you're hooked on this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what city you're watching from. Now on with the story. Robert Miller woke up once again before his alarm went off. It was 5:30 in the morning, and the pre-dawn light over New York City was just beginning to touch the skyline above Park Avenue. He stared at the ceiling for a few seconds, mentally organizing the schedule that awaited him. 3 important meetings, a video conference with international investors, and a review of contracts that would decide the future of one of his ventures. At 42, Robert had built an empire that started with a small tech startup and had grown into a corporate group with interests in various sectors. His name was synonymous with success, determination, and an almost supernatural ability to turn challenges into opportunities. But no professional achievement could fill the void he felt every morning, waking up alone in that king-size bed. It had been 4 years since Catherine was gone, taken by an illness that had crept in silently, leaving no time for proper goodbyes. 4 years that Robert had learned to live divided between 2 worlds, that of the ruthless businessman and that of the father who had to be strong for 3 children who barely understood why their mother was no longer there. He got up and walked to the room next door. Luke, Laura, and Leo were fast asleep, each in their own bed, but so close they seemed to touch even from a distance. The triplets were now 9 years old, and Robert was still amazed by the synchronicity that existed between them. When one was sad, the others noticed immediately. When one had a nightmare, the siblings would wake up to comfort them. They were the reason Robert kept going, the fuel that drove every decision, every sacrifice, every late night spent reviewing spreadsheets. Still, guilt was a constant companion. Guilt for not being at every school play, guilt for missing soccer games and dance recitals, guilt for leaving them in the care of others while he closed deals that would secure their future but stole their present. Robert knew he needed help, someone who could fill the gaps his routine created. He had tried other nannies, but none had stayed for more than a few months. The children were demanding, not because they were spoiled, but because they missed something money couldn't buy. It was the school principal, Mrs. Davis, who suggested Marina. She had recently arrived in New York City from Charleston and was looking for an opportunity. She had a degree in education, experience with children, and, according to Mrs. Davis, a rare sensitivity for dealing with little ones who had experienced loss. Robert agreed to the interview more out of politeness than hope. Marina arrived punctually at the scheduled time on a rainy March afternoon. Robert received her in his home office, a room dominated by shelves packed with business books and a mahogany desk that had witnessed decisions that moved millions of dollars. She entered with light steps, wearing a simple, light-colored blouse and jeans, her brown hair tied back in a ponytail that revealed a young face with delicate features and eyes that conveyed a mix of determination and sweetness. The conversation began formally. Robert asked the usual questions about experience, availability, and salary expectations. Marina answered clearly, without stuttering, but also without the exaggerated enthusiasm other candidates often showed. There was a serenity about her that was striking. When Robert mentioned that the children had lost their mother, Marina didn't fall into that awkward silence followed by empty condolences. She simply nodded, as if she perfectly understood the weight of that information. It was Luke who made the final decision without knowing it. In the middle of the interview, the boy ran into the office, chased by Laura, who was yelling something about a stolen toy. Leo followed, trying to mediate the fight as he always did, the natural peacemaker of the trio. Robert was about to intervene, but Marina calmly stood up and knelt down to the children's level. She spoke with them for a few minutes, listening to each one's complaints without taking sides. Then she suggested they make a deal. Each would get to play with the red toy car for 20 minutes, and she would time it herself. The children agreed without resistance, and Marina took out her phone to set the timer. But before she did, She asked for their names, repeated each one carefully, and said she was very happy to meet them. Something shifted in that moment. Robert saw an acceptance in his children's eyes that didn't come easily. Marina hadn't tried to win them over with promises or gifts. She hadn't forced a smile or shown any anxiety. She was simply there, present, respectful, and genuinely interested in what they had to say. She started the next day. The routine they established was simple. Marina arrived at 7 in the morning, made the children's breakfast, took them to school, picked them up at dismissal, helped with homework, and stayed with them until Robert returned, which was usually around 8 at night. She didn't work on weekends unless Robert needed to travel, a situation for which she had shown flexibility from the start. The first few weeks were an adjustment period. Marina observed everything carefully, learning each child's tastes, their quirks, their fears. Luke loved to draw and had frequent nightmares. Laura was the most talkative and loved to make up stories, where she was always the hero. Leo was quiet, observant, and had a habit of hugging his siblings when he sensed they were sad. Marina absorbed every detail, adjusting her approach as needed. Robert noticed the changes when he came home. The living room, once impeccably organized by the housekeeper, Mrs. Rosa, now had misplaced cushions, toys scattered on the rug, and drawings taped to the refrigerator. The silence that used to dominate the apartment gave way to laughter, lively conversations, and even some childish arguments that he would hear. Upon opening the door, it was a mess, but a living, breathing, real mess. One evening, arriving earlier than usual, Robert found Marina sitting on the living room floor with the 3 children gathered around her. She was reading a book aloud, using different voices for each character. Luke was leaning against her shoulder, Laura was sitting on her lap, and Leo was lying on his stomach, his chin propped on his hands, completely absorbed in the story. They didn't even notice when Robert walked in. He stood at the entrance, watching the scene, and felt something he didn't expect, a mix of gratitude and melancholy. Gratitude because his children finally seemed truly happy, melancholy because that image evoked memories of Catherine, who used to do the exact same thing, reading to the triplets before bed, creating imaginary worlds that made them forget any sadness. Robert swallowed hard and announced his presence with a discreet cough. The children ran to hug him, all talking at once about the story Marina was telling. She stood up, automatically smoothed her hair, and said she was about to leave. Robert walked her to the door. Before she left, he murmured a thank you. Marina smiled faintly, said it was her job, and wished him a good night. But Robert knew it wasn't just a job. There was something more to her care, a dedication that went beyond professional duty. He just didn't know if he should be happy or worried about it. The months passed, and Marina's presence became as natural as the furniture in the house. She knew the routine better than Robert himself. She knew Luke wouldn't eat carrots under any circumstances, that Laura loved to dance before bed, that Leo needed some alone time after school to process his day. She also knew when Robert was stressed, just by the way he closed the door when he arrived. On those days she would leave dinner ready, and a note saying the children had already eaten and were asleep. Robert began to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way Marina tied her hair back when she was concentrating, the way she bit her lower lip while helping Leo with math problems, the discreet smile that lit up her face when the children did something funny. She rarely talked about herself, always maintaining a professional demeanor, but sometimes Robert would catch her looking out the window with a distant expression, as if she were in another place, another time. One morning, Robert had to travel to Chicago for a meeting that couldn't be postponed. It was supposed to be a one-day trip, in and out, but it meant Marina would have to stay with the children from early on. She agreed without hesitation, and Robert left with a clear conscience. The meeting ran longer than expected, stretching into the night. When it finally ended, Robert was too exhausted to catch the flight back. He decided to sleep at the hotel and return the next morning. He woke up early, anxious to get home. In the cab to the airport, he called Marina to let her know about the delay. She answered with her usual calm voice, said everything was fine, that the children had slept well and were already having breakfast. Robert felt a disproportionate sense of relief hearing that, as if a part of him feared something bad might happen in his absence. When he got home, he found the children in the living room, watching cartoons, while Marina folded clean laundry on the sofa. She stood up when she saw him, explaining that she had given the three of them a bath, prepared their school uniforms, and had already packed their backpacks. Robert thanked her, but there was something different in the air, an intimacy that hadn't been there before. It was as if in those hours she had been alone caring for his children. An invisible barrier had been crossed. Fall arrived, bringing with it cooler temperatures and a growing restlessness in Robert's chest. He realized he thought about Marina even when he was at the office, wondering how the children were, if she needed anything, if everything was okay. It wasn't professional concern. It was something deeper, more unsettling. He tried to push these thoughts away, to focus on the numbers, the strategies, the decisions that needed to be made. But the image of her sitting on the floor, reading to his children, always returned. One afternoon, during an important meeting with investors, Robert found himself staring out his office window, lost in thought about what Marina and the children might be doing at that moment. Michael, his business partner, had to call his name twice before he snapped back to attention. After the meeting, Michael pulled him aside and asked if everything was okay. Robert just said he was tired, but they both knew it was more than that. The truth was, Robert was confused. He felt guilty for thinking about Marina that way, as if he were betraying Catherine's memory. At the same time, he couldn't deny how important she had become, not just for the children, but for him too. It was as if the house had started breathing again after years of holding its breath. There was music again, genuine laughter. That good kind of mess that indicated life was happening within those walls. Robert started coming home earlier, making up excuses for himself. He told himself it was to see the children before bed, to keep up with their school activities, to be a more present father. But deep down, he knew it was also for the pleasure of finding Marina there, with her welcoming smile and that presence that made any environment feel lighter and warmer. There was one particular night that deeply affected Robert. It was a Friday, and he had come home earlier than usual. The children were in the backyard playing with Marina. Luke was trying to teach her how to make paper airplanes. Laura was organizing an imaginary picnic with her toys, and Leo had simply sat next to her, flipping through a book. Robert stood at the kitchen door, watching the scene through the window. It was Mrs. Rosa who approached, drying her hands on her apron. "She's good for them," the housekeeper said softly. "And for you too, if you don't mind me saying." Robert looked at Mrs. Rosa, surprised. She wasn't talking about Marina as an employee. She was talking about her as a person, as someone who had become part of that family in a way that transcended any job description. Marina, for her part, maintained the same demeanor as always, polite, attentive, dedicated. If she noticed anything different in the way Robert looked at her, she didn't show it. She continued to treat him with the formal respect of an employee, although there were moments when their eyes met, and something unsaid hung in the air between them. They were brief seconds, charged with a tension that neither of them dared to name. Mrs. Rosa, the housekeeper who had worked in the house for years, began to make more direct comments. She would say that Marina was a special young woman, different from all the others who had come and gone. She mentioned how the children had changed, how they were happier, more confident. And she always finished by looking at Robert in a way that said more than words ever could. Robert would just agree, seemingly paying little attention, but he knew Mrs. Rosa was right. Marina was different. And that scared him deeply. The fear wasn't of Marina herself, but of what she represented. It was the possibility of loving again, of opening his heart to someone new, of risking getting hurt or even worse, hurting the children if something went wrong. Robert had built walls around his heart after losing Catherine, walls he believed were necessary to protect himself and his children. But Marina, without realizing it, was tearing down those walls brick by brick, just by being herself. November brought the heat back to New York, and with it, the end of the year approached. The children started talking about Christmas, excited about decorating the tree and getting presents. Robert realized it would be the 5th Christmas without Catherine, but the first one where his children seemed genuinely excited about the holiday. And he knew that had a lot to do with Marina's presence, which had brought back to the house something he thought was lost forever, the feeling of home. It was December 23rd when everything began to change for good. Robert had been at his corporate office for over 10 hours. December 23rd should have been a quiet day, a shorter workday before the holiday, but an unexpected problem with an international supplier had turned everything into chaos. Contracts needed to be reviewed, urgent emails awaited replies, and a video conference that was supposed to last an hour stretched to 3. When he finally got a break, it was already past 9 at night. He picked up his phone and saw 2 messages from Marina. The first, sent at 6 in the evening, asked if he would be home for dinner. The second, from 8, simply said the children had eaten and were playing. Robert typed a quick reply, explaining it would still be a few hours and telling her not to worry about waiting up. Marina replied that she would stay until he got there, that it was no problem. But it was a problem. Robert knew he was already pushing his luck with her goodwill. It was the day before Christmas Eve, and Marina surely had plans, places to go, people to see. Yet she remained there, taking care of his children as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He felt a tightness in his chest, a mix of guilt and gratitude that was becoming increasingly frequent. He returned to his documents, determined to finish quickly. But exhaustion was taking its toll. The letters began to dance on the computer screen, and his eyelids felt as heavy as lead. He rested his head on the desk, planning to rest for just a few minutes. Just a few minutes, he repeated to himself, as the darkness of sleep swallowed him. When he opened his eyes, the light coming through the office window confused him. He looked at his watch and took a few seconds to process the information. It was 6:15 in the morning, December 24th, Christmas Eve. He had slept at the office all night. Panic was instantaneous. Robert grabbed his phone and saw 3 missed calls from Marina, all made after midnight. There was also a message sent, at 1 in the morning, saying the children were asleep and that she would stay until he arrived. No demands, no tone of complaint, just the simple, direct information. But Robert knew what it meant. Marina had spent the entire night at his house, taking care of his children without being asked, without having agreed to it. He rushed out of the office, not even bothering to tidy the papers scattered across his desk. The morning traffic in New York was lighter because of the holiday, and he managed to get home in 20 minutes. He opened the door, with his heart pounding, prepared to find Marina annoyed or worse, ready to leave. What he found was completely different. The living room was transformed. The Christmas tree, which had been stored away since the previous year, was set up in the corner, still without ornaments but standing tall and ready. Boxes of colorful baubles, string lights, and garlands were open on the floor, and there, sitting around the tree, were Luke, Laura, and Leo, still in their pajamas, laughing as Marina held up a golden ornament and pretended it was magic, making funny voices that drew peals of laughter. From the children, Robert stood frozen at the entrance, unable to move. The scene was so perfect, so full of life and joy, that he felt his eyes sting. Marina was the first to notice his presence. Her smile faded slightly, replaced by an expression of surprise but not annoyance. The children ran to hug him, all talking at once about the tree, about how Marina had the idea to set it up before he got home, about how much fun it would be to decorate it together. Robert hugged all 3, but his eyes never left Marina, who had stood up and was now nervously tucking loose strands of hair behind her ear. After the children went back to the tree, Robert approached Marina, his voice heavy with embarrassment and guilt. He apologized, explained that he had fallen asleep without realizing it, that he never intended to leave her stuck there all night. But before he could finish, Marina raised her hand in a gentle gesture that stopped him. "It's okay," she said, in that soft voice that could calm any storm. "The kids slept soundly. When they woke up, they asked for you, and I told them you had an emergency at work but would be home soon. I suggested we prepare a surprise, and they loved the idea. Don't worry, it really wasn't a problem at all." Robert wanted to believe she was just being polite, but there was a sincerity in her eyes that convinced him it was true. Marina wasn't there out of obligation. She was there because she wanted to be. "But it's Christmas Eve," Robert said, the guilt still weighing on his voice. "You weren't scheduled to work today. I need to compensate you somehow, pay for the overtime. Marina shook her head a small smile touching her lips. "You don't have to. I love being with them. Besides, I didn't have any urgent plans." The answer piqued Robert's curiosity. No plans for Christmas, he thought. But he said nothing, just thanked her again. Marina excused herself to go to the kitchen to make breakfast, and Robert stood there watching his children decorate the tree, a strange feeling taking over his chest. It was as if something was changing, as if a door he had kept locked for years was slowly creaking open. The day went on with an unusual lightness. Robert decided he wouldn't open his laptop, wouldn't check emails, wouldn't think about work. That day was for the children. And for Marina, he realized with surprise. She had stayed, even though she didn't have to, and now she seemed as much a part of that morning as the Christmas tree sparkling in the corner of the room. They decorated the tree together, each child choosing where to place their favorite ornaments. Marina helped Leo reach the higher branches, while Robert held Laura in his arms so she could place the star on top. Luke, always the most artistic, arranged the ornaments by color, creating a pattern only he understood, but that looked beautiful nonetheless. When they finished, they all stepped back to admire the result. The lights blinked in a steady rhythm, and the baubles reflected the morning light streaming through the windows. It was imperfect, with empty spaces in some spots and too crowded in others, but it was theirs. It was real. It was in the middle of the afternoon, while the children were watching a movie in the living room, that Robert finally asked the question that had been tormenting him since the morning. He and Marina were in the kitchen. She was making a snack and he was pretending to help, but really just watching her. "Marina," he said, his voice hesitant, "are you spending Christmas with your family?" It wasn't really a question, more of a statement seeking confirmation, but the silence that followed was too heavy. Marina stopped cutting the bread, her hand still on the cutting board. After a few seconds, she turned to face him, and Robert saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Sadness. Not the superficial sadness of a bad day, but the deep, old kind that resides in the soul. "I'll be spending it alone," she said finally, her voice lower than usual. "I've lived alone for a few years. My family." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "My family isn't here anymore." Robert felt the floor drop out from under him. "Isn't here anymore." He knew that expression. He used similar euphemisms when he had to explain to the children about Catherine. He wanted to ask more, to understand what had happened, but something in Marina's gaze stopped him. There was pain there, a pain he recognized because he carried a similar one. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, not knowing what else to say. Marina shrugged, a gesture that tried to be casual but betrayed the contained emotion. "It was a few years ago. I've learned to deal with it. The holidays are harder, but I've gotten used to it." If you were in Robert's shoes, would you have invited her, or would you have let Marina spend Christmas alone? Tell us in the comments. Robert didn't think. He didn't calculate risks or consequences. He didn't worry about what was appropriate or not. He just felt that he couldn't let this woman who had cared for his children with such dedication spend Christmas alone in an empty apartment. "Spend Christmas with us," he said, the words tumbling out before he could censor them. Marina looked up, surprised. "Robert, I can't. That would be intrusive. I'm your employee. It's not appropriate." But Robert had already made his decision. He shook his head, insisting, "You're not just an employee. You're someone my children love, someone who brings joy to this house. Besides," he continued, his voice growing firmer, "you're already here. You've already decorated the tree with us. It would be weird for you to leave. Now and come back the next day. Stay. Please." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Marina looked at him as if trying to decipher his intentions, searching for signs of pity or obligation. But Robert held her gaze, letting her see that the invitation was sincere. "Are you sure?" she asked finally, her voice almost a whisper. "Absolutely," Robert replied. Marina bit her lower lip, hesitant. Then, in an almost imperceptible movement, she nodded. "Okay, I'll stay, but only if you let me help with dinner." Robert smiled, feeling a disproportionate sense of relief. "Deal." The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange mix of normalcy and tension. The children were ecstatic when they learned Marina would be spending Christmas with them. They asked if she would sleep over, if she would wake up early to open presents with them, if she would help make the Christmas cookies Mrs. Rosa always prepared. Marina answered each question patiently, promising she would do all of those things. Robert watched from a distance, still processing what he had done. He had invited Marina to spend Christmas at his home with his family. It wasn't just a gesture of kindness. It was an acknowledgement of something he had been trying to deny for months. Marina was no longer just the nanny. She was someone important, someone who made a difference, someone he didn't want to see leave. That night, after the children had finally gone to sleep, exhausted from all the excitement, Robert and Marina were left alone in the living room. The tree glowed in the corner, and the silence between them was comfortable, yet charged with something unsaid. "Thank you," Marina said suddenly, breaking the silence, "for letting me stay. It's been a long time since I've spent Christmas with other people." Robert turned to look at her. The light from the tree illuminated her face, highlighting her brown eyes that shone with restrained emotion. "You don't have to thank me. We should be thanking you. You brought life back to this house." Marina smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "They were special," she said. "My parents, my siblings, losing them was like losing a part of myself. But being here, with you and the children, reminds me that it's still possible to build something. It's still possible to feel like part of something bigger." Robert felt his heartache. He knew exactly what she was talking about. The loneliness of losing someone you loved, the feeling of being adrift, without an anchor, the difficulty of believing that joy could exist again. "I understand," he said softly. "More than you know." Their eyes met, and in that moment something changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no music or grand words. It was just the silent recognition of two souls who had suffered similar losses and who, somehow, had found each other. Christmas morning dawned with the excited shouts of children. Robert woke with a start, taking a few seconds to remember where he was and what had happened. When he went down to the living room, he found Marina already awake, her hair loose on her shoulders, making coffee while the children opened the presents he had bought weeks earlier. The morning was perfect. They ate the cookies Marina had baked the night before, watched Christmas movies, and laughed more than Robert could remember laughing in years. The children played with their new toys, occasionally running over to show something to him or Marina, treating her with the same naturalness they treated him. It was during lunch, as they all ate around the table, that Luke asked an innocent question that would change everything. "Aunt Marina, are you going to be our nanny forever?" The silence that followed was tense. Robert saw Marina swallow hard, her fork frozen in mid-air. "Forever is a very long time, Luke," she answered carefully, "but I'll stay as long as you need me." "What if we always need you?" Laura insisted, her big eyes fixed on Marina. Marina smiled, but Robert saw the emotion she was trying to hide. "Then I'll always be here." Robert felt something stir inside his chest. Decision began to form, still hazy, still scary but undeniable. This woman sitting at his table, laughing with his children, wasn't temporary. She wasn't just an employee, she was someone he wanted to stay. And not just for the children. The evening arrived, bringing with it a gentle melancholy. Marina said she needed to go home, that she had overstayed her welcome. Robert didn't insist that she stay, but he walked her to the door. Before she left, he gently took her arm. "Marina, thank you for everything, for taking care of them, for staying, for—" He hesitated, searching for the right words, "for being you." Marina looked at him, and Robert saw tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for making me feel like part of a family again." And then she was gone, leaving Robert standing at the door, his heart beating in a way it hadn't in years. Something had changed that Christmas, something deep and irreversible. And Robert knew that things would never be the same again. The days following Christmas were different. Robert noticed it in small details that had previously gone unnoticed, the way Marina smiled when he came home, no longer Just the polite smile of an employee, but something warmer, more genuine. The way the children talked about her at dinner, telling stories of their daily adventures, with an excitement that warmed Robert's heart. And most of all, the way he himself began to change his routine, leaving the office earlier, turning down evening commitments, finding excuses to be at home. January brought the intense heat of a New York summer and the restart of activities. The children went back to school, and the routine resumed its usual rhythm. But there was something different in the air, an unspoken tension that hung between Robert and Marina whenever they were alone. Glances that lasted a second too long, hands that almost touched when reaching for the same object, conversations that started about trivial matters but drifted to more personal, deeper topics. It was Mrs. Rosa who first verbalized what everyone in the house had already noticed. One morning, after Marina had left with the children for school, the housekeeper found Robert in his office with that maternal expression she used when she needed to say something important. "Mr. Robert," she began, using the formal address she had never abandoned despite years of familiarity. "I need to tell you something. It may not be my place, but I've worked in this house long enough to feel I have the right to speak." Robert looked up from the papers he was reviewing, intrigued. "Of course, Mrs. Rosa. Go ahead." She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Marina is a special young woman, different from all the others who have been here. The children love her. The house is more alive since she arrived. But," she paused significantly, "you need to be careful." "Careful of what?" Robert asked, though he already knew the answer. "Of feelings," Mrs. Rosa said directly. "Yours and hers. I know it's not easy being alone for so long. I know you miss Mrs. Catherine every day, but mixing work with feelings can complicate everything. For you, for her, and especially for the children." Robert remained silent, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. Mrs. Rosa was right, and he knew it. But what could he do when his heart didn't obey logic? How could he separate the professional from the personal, when the person in question was present in every important moment of his family life? "I know," he murmured finally. "I'm trying to keep things professional." Mrs. Rosa smiled sadly. "You may be trying, but anyone who sees you two together can tell it's already past that point. I'm just saying you need to think carefully before taking any step. The children are already too attached. If something goes wrong—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Robert understood perfectly. If something went wrong between him and Marina, it wouldn't just be a broken relationship. It would be the loss of someone the children considered family. It would be another absence they would have to process. And he didn't know if the triplets could handle another loss. That night Robert stayed in his office late, not because of work, but because he needed to think. Every argument his mind presented against getting closer to Marina seemed solid. She worked for him. There was an unequal power dynamic. The children could suffer if things didn't work out. He himself wasn't sure if he was ready to open his heart again. They were all valid, rational, sensible reasons. But the heart, Robert discovered, didn't care for rational reasons. The turning point came one afternoon in February. Robert had left work early with the intention of taking the children to the park, something he rarely managed to do. When he got home, he found the door ajar and voices coming from the living room. He immediately recognized Marina's voice. But there was another, a man's voice that he didn't know. He entered quietly and saw Marina sitting on the sofa, talking to a tall man with dark hair and a confident smile. The children were playing on the rug, seemingly oblivious to the adults' conversation. Upon seeing Robert, Marina quickly stood up, a blush creeping up her cheeks. "Robert," she said, a bit flustered, "this is Philip. He's—" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "A friend from Charleston. He's visiting New York and stopped by to see me." Philip extended his hand with a friendly smile. "A pleasure. Marina has told me a lot about you and the children. It seems she's found a special family here." Robert shook his hand, but a strange, uncomfortable feeling settled in his chest. Jealousy. It was pure and simple jealousy, he recognized with surprise. He was jealous of seeing Marina talking to another man, laughing in that natural, relaxed way. Philip didn't stay long. He said his goodbyes, mentioning he had a dinner reservation and wanted to see Marina again before heading back to Charleston. When he left, the silence in the room was tense. Marina started tidying up the children's toys, avoiding Robert's gaze. "I'm sorry if it was inappropriate to have a visitor during work hours," she said finally. "I didn't think you'd be home so early." "It's no problem," Robert replied, struggling to keep his voice neutral. "Your life, your decisions." But it wasn't true. It was a problem, a lot of problems. And the biggest one was that Robert couldn't stand the thought of Marina with someone else. He couldn't imagine that Philip, with his charming smile, winning her attention, making her laugh, possibly starting something that Robert didn't have the courage to start. That night, after the children were asleep, Robert lay staring at the ceiling, unable to shut off his mind. He thought about Marina, about how she had transformed his life, about how empty the house felt on the days she wasn't there. He thought about her laughter with Philip, the ease with which they talked, the history they shared. And he thought about Catherine, about what it would be like if she could see the situation he was in, torn between loyalty to the past and the possibility of a future. The answer came in an unexpected way. The next day, while organizing some things in his office, Robert found a letter Catherine had written years ago, when she was sick but still lucid. She had never given him the letter, and Robert found it by chance among her personal belongings that he kept in a locked drawer. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope and began to read. Catherine's words were full of love, but also a wisdom that only someone facing their own mortality possesses. She wrote about the children, about how she wanted them to grow up happy. And then, in a paragraph that made Robert stop breathing, she wrote, "If one day you find someone who makes you smile again, someone who cares for our children with love, don't be afraid to start over. I don't want you to be trapped in the past. I want you to live, to be happy, to let love into your life again. Promise me you won't lock yourself away in work and loneliness. Promise me you'll let yourself feel." Robert read and reread those words until they were etched in his mind. It was as if Catherine were there, giving him permission, encouraging him to move on. The tears he had held back for so long finally fell, silent but liberating. He held the letter to his chest and allowed himself to cry, no longer for the loss, but for the gratitude of having been loved by someone so special, and for the hope that he could love again. But even with Catherine's letter echoing in his mind, Robert was still afraid to take the next step, and that's when something happened that forced him to act. It was a Friday night, and Robert had come home later than usual. Marina was gathering her things, getting ready to leave. There was something different about her, a sadness he couldn't identify. "Is everything okay?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. Marina hesitated, then sighed. "Philip called me today. She bit her lip, trying to find the right words. "He asked me to move back to Charleston. He said he misses me, that we could try something serious. He found a position for me at a private school there, with a better salary than I make here." Robert felt the ground disappear from under his feet. She was thinking of leaving, going away, leaving the children, leaving him. The mere possibility made something inside him break. "And are you going to?" he asked, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. Marina looked at him, her eyes searching for something in his face. "I don't know. It's a good opportunity. And Philip is a good man. We have history, but—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "But I can't. Imagine leaving the children. Leaving this house, leaving—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Robert understood what she didn't say. "Leaving you." The words hung between them, unsaid, but as present as if they had been shouted. It was in that moment that Robert made his decision. He could no longer pretend he felt nothing. He could no longer hide behind excuses about professionalism or propriety. If he didn't do something now, he would lose Marina forever, and he discovered he couldn't bear that possibility. "Don't go," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Please don't go." Marina looked at him, surprised. "Robert, I know I have no right to ask this," he continued, the words rushing out before he lost his nerve. "I know I'm your employer, that there's a line that shouldn't be crossed. But the truth is, That line was crossed a long time ago. Since the day I saw you reading to my children, since the Christmas we spent together, since every conversation, every look, every shared moment. Robert, Marina murmured, but he didn't stop. You brought life back to this house, you brought joy to my children, and you brought something I thought I'd never feel again. You made me want to be home, you made me smile again, you made me believe it's possible to start over. I'm not asking you to stay just for the children, I'm asking because I need you to stay. Because He took a deep breath, gathering all his courage. Because I've fallen in love with you. The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Marina stared at him with wide eyes, tears beginning to stream down her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was a trembling whisper. Do you have any idea how many times I've wanted to hear those words? How many nights I've spent scolding myself for feeling what I feel? For looking at you and imagining things an employee shouldn't imagine? Robert took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Then say it. Say what you feel. Marina closed her eyes, the tears now falling freely. I love you. I love you, and I love your children. I love this house and the life we've built here. But I'm so scared. Scared of messing everything up. Scared of losing you all if something goes wrong, scared of not being enough. Robert raised his hand, gently wiping the tears from her face. You are more than enough, you're perfect. And yes, I'm scared too. Scared of loving again. Scared of being happy when I feel like I don't have that right. But I'm more scared of letting you go and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. Marina opened her eyes, and Robert saw in them all the vulnerability, all the love, all the fear she carried. And then, slowly, she raised her hand and touched his face, a soft touch that sent a shiver down his spine. I'll stay, she whispered. But we have to do this right, for the children, for us. Robert nodded, holding her hand against his face. We will, one day at a time. And then, finally, he kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, filled with promise and hope, of shared fears and renewed dreams. When they parted, they were both smiling through their tears. They spent a few minutes there, just holding each other, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. Robert felt his heart pounding in his chest, a mix of joy and nervousness taking over. He had taken the step he had so feared, and contrary to all his fears, the world hadn't collapsed. Instead, he felt more whole than he had in years. Marina was the first to break the silence. We need to talk to the children, she said softly, still in his arms. They deserve to know that something has changed between us, but we need to do it carefully, so they understand that nothing will change in the love we have for them. Robert nodded, kissing the top of her head. Tomorrow. We'll talk to them tomorrow. They need to understand that you're not taking their mother's place, but that you're creating a new place, your own place. And you, Marina asked, lifting her face to look at him. Are you ready for that? To really let the past be the past and build something new? Robert thought of Catherine's letter, of her words asking him to be happy. Yes, he answered with conviction. I spent 4 years living in the past, thinking that's what I was supposed to do. But now I understand that honoring Catherine's memory doesn't mean I stop living. It means living the best I can, being happy, giving our children the best. And you make me want to be that better version of myself. The words touched Marina deeply. She hugged Robert tighter, burying her face in his chest. They stayed like that for a few more minutes, just enjoying the closeness, the comfort of finally being able to express what they felt, without fear or guilt. When Marina finally got ready to leave, Robert walked her to the door. Before she left, he held her hand. You know everything is going to change now, right? I can't pretend you're just my employee anymore. I can't hold back when I come home and see you. Marina smiled, a genuine, happy smile. I know, and it's okay. In fact, it's better than okay. It's perfect. But the outside world hadn't disappeared, and they would soon discover that choosing love was only the beginning. The real challenges were still to come. Robert and Marina's decision to let their feelings blossom wasn't met with the universal acceptance they had naively hoped for. The first few weeks were a mix of private happiness and growing tension from external sources. Robert tried to keep everything discreet, not out of shame, but out of respect for the children and to avoid unnecessary gossip. But in New York, especially in the business circles he moved in, secrets didn't last long. It was Michael, his partner and longtime friend, who first broached the subject. During a meeting, after everyone else had left, he closed the conference room door and faced Robert with a serious expression. "I need to talk to you about something delicate," Michael began, choosing his words carefully. "There are rumors going around about you and the kid's nanny. You know how people talk. Some are saying it's inappropriate, others are making tasteless jokes. I want to know if it's true, and if it is, if you've thought through the consequences." Robert took a deep breath, remaining calm. "Marina isn't just the nanny. She's the woman I've fallen in love with. And yes, I've thought about the consequences, but I'm not going to stop being happy because of what other people think." Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get it, Robert. I really do. You deserve to be happy after everything you've been through. But think about it. She works for you. If things go south, you lose the nanny and the kids lose someone they love. Not to mention the potential for lawsuits, harassment claims. You're putting yourself in a vulnerable position." "I know the risks," Robert replied firmly. "But for the first time in years, I feel alive again. The kids are happy. Marina makes me want to be a better father, a better man. I'm not giving that up." Michael studied his friend's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. If this is what you want, I support you. But be careful. Protect yourself and protect her. The world can be cruel to relationships that don't fit the traditional mold." Michael's words echoed in Robert's mind over the next few days. He knew his friend was right. But how could he protect what he was building with Marina? How could he shield the children from others' judgments? The answer came in a conversation he had with his own kids. It was a Sunday morning and they were all in the living room. Marina had gone to the grocery store and Robert took the opportunity to talk with Luke, Laura and Leo. They were growing up, becoming more perceptive, and Robert knew he couldn't hide the truth from them. "Kids," he began, sitting on the floor with them, "I need to talk to you about something important. You know that Marina is very special to us, right?" All three heads nodded in unison. Laura spoke first, as always. "We love Marina, Daddy. She's the best nanny in the world." "She's more than a nanny," Robert continued carefully. "She's someone who takes care of you with love, who makes this house a home. And Daddy," he paused, searching for the right words, "Daddy has fallen in love with her too." The silence that followed was brief. Leo, always the most thoughtful, was the one who asked, "Like how you loved Mommy?" Robert felt his heart ache, but he nodded. "Yes, son, in a different way, because Mommy will always be special, and no one will ever take her place. But yes, I love Marina." To Robert's surprise, it was Luke who smiled first. "Does that mean she's going to live here with us?" "Maybe," Robert replied. "If you're all okay with that. But I want you to know that nothing changes the love I have for you, or the memory of Mommy. Marina isn't replacing anyone. She's adding more love to our family." Laura stood up and hugged her father. "I like Marina, Daddy. She makes you smile. You didn't smile very much before." His daughter's words hit Robert hard. He hadn't realized how much his sadness had affected the children, how much they longed to see him happy. He hugged all three, feeling an immense gratitude for having such understanding kids. But not everything would be so simple. The news of the relationship eventually reached people who were not so understanding. Denise, Catherine's older sister, showed up at Robert's house one afternoon unannounced. She had never been close to her niece and nephews, visiting only sporadically, but now she was here with an expression of undisguised indignation. "I need to talk to you," she said, as soon as Robert opened the door. "It's about this nanny you're involved with." Robert let her in but maintained a firm posture. "Her name is Marina, and yes, we're together. Is that a problem for you?" Denise crossed her arms, her eyes flashing. "A problem? Of course it's a problem. Catherine is barely gone, and you're already replacing her with an employee. What kind of example are you setting? For the children? What will people think?" Robert felt anger rise, but he controlled himself. First, Catherine hasn't been gone for a short time. It's been 4 years. 4 years in which I've raised our children alone, worked to give them everything they needed, and tried to keep her memory alive. Second, Marina is not just an employee. She's an incredible woman who cares for my children as if they were her own. And third, I don't care what people think. I only care about the happiness of my children and my own. Denise shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. Catherine would be disappointed. She trusted you to take care of her children, not to bring strangers into the family. Those words went too far. Robert took a step forward, his voice low but charged with emotion. Don't you dare speak for Catherine. You barely visited her when she was sick. You weren't there for her final moments. And you didn't show up to help in the years that followed, when I was drowning in work and responsibilities, trying to be both a father and a mother. Now you show up here after 4 years to judge my choices. You don't have that right. Denise seemed to shrink a little, but she still tried to maintain a defensive posture. I just want what's best for my niece and nephews. So do I, Robert replied, his voice softening slightly. And what's best for them is to grow up in a home filled with love, where they see that it's possible to be happy even after a loss. Marina brought light back into our lives. She isn't erasing Catherine's memory. She's honoring her legacy by caring for her children with so much love. Denise had no answer for that. She was silent for a moment, then turned to leave. At the door, she stopped and looked back. I hope you know what you're doing, Robert. For your sake and for the children's. After she left, Robert stood alone in the living room, processing everything that had been said. He knew he would face more judgment, more malicious comments, more people questioning his choices. But he also knew with absolute certainty that Marina was worth every challenge. The real test came a few weeks later. Marina had been visibly upset for days, and Robert finally found out why. She had been receiving anonymous calls, cruel messages from unknown numbers, accusing her of being a gold digger, of being with Robert for his money, of trying to take the place of a woman who was barely gone. The words were venomous, calculated to hurt. Robert found Marina crying in the spare room where she kept her things. She tried to hide her tears when she saw him, but he had already seen. He sat down beside her, taking her hands in his. Tell me what's happening, he asked gently. Marina hesitated, then showed him the messages. Robert read each one, feeling his anger grow with every cruel word. When he finished, he pulled Marina into a tight hug. None of this is true, he said firmly. You know it, I know it, and the children know it. These people are cowards, hiding behind anonymity. Don't let them destroy what we've built. But what if they're right? Marina sobbed. What if me being here is just causing problems for you and the children? Maybe it would be better if I left, let you have a normal life. Robert pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. Marina, listen to me, very carefully. You are not causing problems. You are bringing love, joy, life. The people sending these messages are the ones with problems. They can't stand to see others happy. And if you leave, if you let these people win, we all lose. I lose the woman I love. The children lose someone they consider family, and you lose the chance to be happy. But it's so hard, Marina whispered, fighting against everyone and everything. Robert dried her tears with his thumb. I know, but we're not fighting alone. We're fighting together, and together we're stronger than any nasty comment, than any unfair judgment. Marina closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Then, when she opened them again, there was determination there. You're right. I won't let them destroy what we have. I won't give up on you. It was in that moment that Robert made his final decision. It wasn't enough to just resist the external attacks. He needed to take an action that would make it clear to everyone, including Marina, how much she meant to him. 2 weeks later, on a quiet evening after the children had gone to bed, Robert called Marina out to the balcony. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and a gentle breeze brought the cool of the night. Marina noticed something was different by the way Robert was nervous, repeatedly running a hand through his hair. Is everything okay? She asked, concerned. Robert smiled, taking her hands in his. It's more than okay, Marina. These last few months with you have been the best I've had in years. You've turned my house into a home. You've turned my children into happy kids again. And you've turned my heart into something capable of loving again. Marina, I know it's soon. I know there are challenges ahead. But I also know with absolute certainty that I want you by my side. Not as an employee, not as a nanny, but as part of my family, as my partner, as the woman I love. Then, before Marina's astonished eyes, Robert knelt down and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Marina, will you marry me? Will you officially build this family with us? Marina covered her mouth with her hands, tears already streaming freely. Robert, Are you sure? What about the children? I talked to them, Robert replied, smiling. And you? Know what Luke said? He said we'd finally have a real mum again. Laura asked if you would wear a white dress, and Leo just smiled and said he already knew this was going to happen. Marina laughed through her tears, extending a trembling hand. Yes, I'll marry you. 1,000 times, yes. Robert slid the ring onto her finger, then stood up and kissed her, a kiss full of promise and hope. When they parted, they were both smiling through their tears. The months that followed were not perfect. There were still comments, still judgments, but Robert and Marina faced everything together, supported by the love they had for each other and for the children who united them. Denise eventually apologized, admitting her fear was that Catherine would be forgotten. Robert assured her that would never happen, and slowly even she began to accept Marina as part of the family. The wedding was simple, an intimate ceremony with only their closest friends and family. Luke, Laura, and Leo were in the wedding party, beaming with happiness. And when the officiant declared Robert and Marina husband and wife, the 3 children ran to hug them, forming a circle of love that no adversity could break. Marina never stopped being the dedicated woman she was. She continued to care for the children with the same love as always, but now with the official title her heart had always longed for. Robert, in turn, became a more balanced man, able to divide his time between work and family, knowing he had someone at home who loved him and cared for his greatest treasures. Years later, when the children were teenagers and Marina and Robert looked back, they marveled at the journey they had taken, from a professional relationship to a real family, from 2 people marked by loss to 2 hearts that found the courage to love again. And whenever someone asked how they had managed to overcome all the obstacles, Robert always had the same answer, with love, patience, and the certainty that second chances exist for those who have the courage to believe. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert and Marina touched your heart. If you were moved, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what part of the story resonated with you the most. Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul. We'll see you in the next episode.